I can start. So I'm a senior instructor at UBC, and I'm also the associate head of Undergraduate Affairs in the Department of Psychology. And yeah, I do a lot of work with an organization called CRESS-BD, which studies psychosocial interventions for bipolar disorder. I also do a lot of research related to student mental health and well-being, again, on a number of teaching and learning enhancement fund grants related to that topic for a number of years. Yeah, that's me.
Perfect. Lynn, if you can, please.
I'm Lynn Alden. I'm a clinical psychologist registered with the College of Psychologists of British Columbia. And my area of interest is understanding and treating anxiety disorders, mood disorders, and related conditions. I'm also a professor in the Department of Psychology at UBC.
Perfect. Yeah, so the second part is that we're going to be talking about the effects of social distancing and isolation and the stress and the effect of those things on the mental health. So maybe if each one of you guys is happy to provide, a few minutes of on the effect of these things on the mental health and wellness of students.
Do you want to go first, Lynn, or do you want me to go?
Either way.
Okay. So I just want to raise, I think when we go into the questions, I think that will be more about solutions potentially. I think I just want to raise where my concerns are for students right now. I'm obviously very concerned in terms of students worrying about graduating and what these measures that are in place mean for them. I'm also very worried for those students who are worried about their grades and what's happening if they get a credit defail on their transcript. So I would actually like a question about that. Like, what are the implications for me if I have a credit standing on my transcript for a course for this particular term that we've just been through? The other thing I'm also very concerned about, obviously, is the social isolation that students might be experiencing, especially those who are potentially living alone in their own single studio apartment. Those people are going to be much more physically isolated than others who might be living with friends, family, etc. I'm also very concerned about the lack of student summer jobs and the stress that might cause as well, because with all the service industries pretty much shut down, I'm imagining there'll be a dearth of summer jobs for people, and I'm sure that will contribute to people's stress. So those are my concerns, and I'm hoping that collectively through this webinar we can maybe come up with some answers to those questions and concerns for people.
Great. Thank you so much, Stephen. And Lynn, if you can, please.
Right. I certainly agree with Stephen about the effect on students, the financial, and also the concerns about graduating and so on. I think they should be reassured that UBC is certainly going to take steps to do what they can to soften the blow. The things that I'm concerned about, I would say, are the uncertainty and the breakdown in routine, because people tend to function better when they have a sense of control over what happens to them. And in general, people feel better when they have a certain structure to their lives. It doesn't have to be rigid, but we often rely on external sources for the structure, like going to classes, seeing friends, and so on, and that breaks down. And then finally, we're inherently social creatures, and being socially distant from people causes loneliness, because people feel that they don't have the contacts they used to have. There's a body of research showing that loneliness affects immune functioning, it affects breathing, it affects health, and so on. So feeling a sense of disconnection from people is an important issue. And that's one thing I'm concerned about with students, especially I think we have international students at UBC who may be isolated from family and friends.
Yeah, that was actually a major concern about international students that have no family in here and they just have to stay in the room and just like have not to go out. That's a big concern for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Would you like to add anything, Stephen, for this, or shall we move on to the question part?
I think we can move on. I agree
Okay.
with all the points made.
So I have received actually a lot of questions. I did send you guys a list of questions so you can just have a look at it before we discuss it. But a lot of questions were similar. So asking like how uncertainty, change, and disruption from COVID-19 can actually increase your stress and anxiety.
Okay, do you want me to take a first stab at that, Lynn? Yeah.
Sure.
So building off what Lynn was saying before about routine and how critical routine is for people's psychological functioning, I'm going to wear my hat of someone who lives with a psychiatric disorder. So I live with bipolar disorder. And I know that one of the most disruptive things surrounding these events has been the lack of routine. This routine of having to go into work, having to teach classes at a particular time, has all been particularly disruptive for me. And I imagine, as Lynn pointed out, that this is also the case for most students. I know from feedback from my students that when I gave live lectures virtually through Zoom, that they really appreciated that scheduling. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's true. It's like every day becomes kind of the same. It's kind of like Groundhog Day. You kind of lose track of weekends and weekdays and so on. And it's easy to just stay in bed and go, why should I get up? What is there to do? So that is important. And uncertainty. Uncertainty tends to lead to worry.
Yeah.
And one thing we know is that the more you worry about something, the more likely it seems. So if people spend a lot of time searching COVID stories online and a lot of time thinking about it, it seems more likely that they will get it or their family members will get it.
Yeah.
I think another change that's hard on students is not to be close to their families. You know, the ones that are, especially the international students, I know they get quite depressed and concerned about family members.
Yeah, true. Okay, we can move on to the second question then. Someone was asking, like, how can I now deal with feeling lonely while I'm actually in self-isolation? What's the solution to this?
Well, I think a big thing is to realize that what we need to do is physical distancing, not social distancing.
Yeah.
That what we need to do is to continue our interpersonal interactions, even if we do it online. Conferences like this, Zoom, is really great for that. You can see people, you can talk to them. I think I can assure all students that their parents would love to hear from them every day to know that they're okay.
Yeah.
Consider distant relatives too, aunts and uncles, cousins, people that are meaningful to you. And don't forget grandma. She may not be on the computer, but you can call her. And that will mean so much. I know my daughter called my father, and that means so much to him to hear from his granddaughter.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's important to keep up the lines of communication electronically.
Yeah, I would agree, and I'd add that going back on the whole setting up a routine for oneself so that it doesn't seem like this monotonous, endless week. That I don't even know when it's weekend and weekday anymore. I find.
Yeah.
But I think what most people would benefit from is setting up a regularly scheduled social routine with people. I mean, it might seem a bit strange initially to contact your friend and say, I'd like to meet with you every day at 5 or every other day at 5, but I can guarantee you that they're probably thinking the same thing and hoping for the same thing. So that if you set up a regularly scheduled social interaction with someone, be it a friend, a close friend, or a family member, maybe it's a daily basis, maybe it's even a weekly basis, that adds to that sense of regularity and that sense of social connectedness. And I'd agree with Lynn in that we should distinguish, I think as our BC Health Minister has, between social isolation and physical distancing. And I think, we should all be practicing physical distancing at this time, but there's ways of working around social isolation using the technologies we have.
Yeah, that's a very actually important point. Physical, not social isolation and distancing. Okay, we can just move on to the third question. Can the social distancing that we are practicing affect us mentally, even when it's over?
I don't think that physical distancing will. And I think with social distancing, if you keep up your contacts, it might even strengthen them, because you could have more contact with people as a result of this. Yeah. So I don't think it inevitably has to produce negative effects. For one thing, if you feel lonely, it makes you realize how much you value people. And that's a positive thing. Human beings are social animals. We value contacts with others. So you can actually use this time to strengthen relationships.
Yeah, I'd agree that this is, I don't think the worry here is about long-term effects, as long as we're cognizant while we're in this current state that we maintain social connections with people. We know that complete social isolation can have actually very negative effects on people, and some of those can be enduring, but I don't think that has to be the case here. And I think, as Lynn pointed out, I think in many cases our social relationships might stand to benefit. I mean, I'm just thinking about the last few weeks, and people from high school I hadn't even talked to in a while had called me, and I called one of them because I was worried about them. I was thinking about them. They live in Ontario, which has a different set of situations than here. And speaking with them, I think was a great benefit to both me and them.
Yeah. Okay. So how do I manage my stress and anxiety while I wait for my results in this situation?
So I'm assuming they mean by, sorry, I'm assuming they mean by the COVID-19 test results?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So I think one of the best things to do is realize that the likelihood that they will test positive is fairly slim at this point, and to keep that in mind. But then also just maintaining a regular routine for themselves, I think, is still critical. And maintaining that social connection is also critical. I think Lynn could probably speak more to the worrying associated with that potential diagnosis than necessarily I can.
Well, I think, first of all, one important thing is to accept your feelings and to acknowledge them and say, I'm feeling anxious, I'm feeling worried, and accept the fact that this is reasonable. Don't pathologize yourself and say you're worrying too much. Accept it and recognize that eventually there will be an outcome. So if we're talking about tests for COVID, I would second what Stephen said. It's unlikely that the person will test positive, but if they do, the odds are it'll be a mild case, or even if it's more severe, if you're young, you're lucky to be young, you're likely to emerge without any ill effects. So I think you have to tell yourself that.
I think maybe the next question was from the same person who is asking, I have tested positive for COVID-19 and my friends and family are avoiding me and so scared of me. So how should I actually, react to this? What can I do?
Well, first off, I think recognize that they're avoiding the COVID. They aren't avoiding you. And you can keep in touch with them, through Zoom, through the telephone, and so on. And don't interpret this or appraise this as rejection. It isn't personal rejection. Appraise it as you are keeping your loved ones safe by remaining away from them.
Yeah, I would agree. It's a matter of framing here. If the person is framing this as them avoiding them personally, these friends and family members are avoiding the virus. They're not avoiding the person. And I think if they keep that in mind and keep the social lines open with these friends and family, I think they'll get through this just fine.
Yeah. Okay, and then what are the best strategies to maintain your mental health during the COVID-19 pandemic?
Well, I think Stephen's already talked to the importance of staying as close to your normal routine as you can. I think another thing that's really important is exercise. One of the best ways to manage anxiety is through exercise. And even if you're in a small room, you can do a certain number of exercises. You know, open a window to get some fresh air. There are a number of online programs that lead people through yoga, through exercise routines. You can download apps. So exercise is very important. I think it's important to come up with activities to do that you find meaningful. It can be books you've been meaning to read. I mean, it's very individual. It can be learning something new. It can be going online, watching movies you haven't seen. But find some positive activities to deal with your life. I think it helps to reframe it as, what can I do? What have I not been doing that I value? And is there any way I can do that now? Over to you, Stephen.
So yeah, I would agree with Lynn about the exercise. For me personally, when I'm dealing with anxiety related to my condition, one of the best things that helps me is engaging in some form of vigorous exercise. And if, for example, I'm having a bout of anxiety, I'm feeling overwhelmed, a bout of vigorous exercise really helps deal with that. Another thing that people might want to consider, I don't practice it myself, but a lot of people I know do, is some sort of meditative practice.
Yeah.
And there's lots of free apps that teach you how to do meditation. Calm, the app Calm, I think, is mostly free. It's sort of like pay for premium use, but it's otherwise a free app that people can try to use meditation to help them. For many people, that does wonders for anxiety.
Another thing you can do is to Google Anxiety Canada, and it'll come up. And they have a whole series of programs to deal specifically with anxiety and with mood to a lesser extent. You can even download apps on your cell phone and set up reminders, and it'll remind you to take a minute to pause and focus on your surroundings, which is a meditative type experience called mindfulness. There are ways to calm your worrying mind and so on. It's a great free app. It's been adopted even by the Mayo Clinic, but it's based on simple behavioral strategies to reduce anxiety.
That's great. The other thing I just wanted to mention is, I didn't realize it till I'd been away from the UBC Vancouver campus for a while, but the amount of exercise I was getting just going from meeting to meeting across campus, and as I assume also students were getting from class to class, is quite a bit, especially on the Vancouver campus. And so I think we need to be mindful of that. So I've been sitting in front of this computer screen doing Zoom meetings. And what I try to do now is go outside and just walk around for a bit in between meetings, not for the sake of regularity, but just to try to get that fresh air and that peace of calm that you get just from walking around.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you can find a place that's more socially isolated. Yeah. Or you can go at a time of day when there aren't many people out, like later in the day during supper hour. You can go out and walk, and there are relatively few people. Or early in the morning, Vancouver is fairly empty. Yeah. If you're lucky enough to have a car, you can drive somewhere and get away from people a bit and just walk around. Yeah. Steve's absolutely right that we get so much activity on a day-to-day basis and we miss it. Yeah. And then we start doing stress eating and getting out of shape, which isn't good. Another thing I would say is that it's important to keep your living environment clean and organized, because if you have a chaotic house, you have a chaotic mind. So simple things like cleaning can give a sense of discipline and order which will calm your mind.
Yeah, that's actually a very good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, and don't look at my background for that.
Well, don't look at mine either.
The next question, actually, I had about 15 to 20, very similar question, very similar to the mood changes. Maybe we have answered some of it, but people normally say they feel angry sometimes and they have a lot of mood changing. And sometimes some of them start crying for no reason or start laughing. How can they really control this? And this is just has actually since the COVID-19 started.
So it's been a little while for this person that they've been experiencing these symptoms?
Roughly, yeah, like mostly 2 months or something. That's what they said since the COVID-19 started. Like when we all shut down university campuses and people had to stay home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lynn, I think I'm going to defer to you on this one because I have suspicions about how to handle it, but I think you're the clinician here, and I'd like to defer to you if that's okay.
Okay, I think first of all, again, accept your feelings, recognize that you're going up and down.
Yeah.
Usually anger, we often think of it as a secondary emotion, that it's covering something else, often fear or depression. It can be useful to keep a journal when you're feeling angry or when your moods are going up and down, and just write out what you're feeling. One technique we often use is a downward arrow. I feel angry. Okay, what does that mean? And go down a layer. What does that mean? Okay, I'm tired of this. What does that mean? Things will never change, and so on. And get to the root of your anger, and your mood changes. Another thing you can do, a great thing to do, is keep a mood record and chart when you go up and down and what was going on, what was going through your mind before you had these emotional changes. Often you'll find there's a fleeting thought or sensation or memory that is triggering the emotion. And if you find out what it is, you can deal with it more directly rather than through emotion. And finally, I'd say normalize your emotions. Everybody's emotional. We all have different patterns of dealing with it. If you go online, you'll see people are talking about being more irritable. So that's not unusual. Stephen, I mean, you may have some thoughts on this.
Yeah, I would just say that if I mean, my initial instinct was to maybe even if these mood changes and uncontrollable bouts of anger persist for an extended period of time, that it might at some point, and maybe you can disagree with me, Lynn, it would be probably good for the individual to reach out to a healthcare practitioner.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There are psychologists providing online therapy.
Yeah. And I'm happy to provide a list of resources, and even most family doctors right now I'm finding are even offering consults online as opposed to in person. So those avenues are open for many people as well.
Absolutely. I think the College of Psychologists, or BCPA, may have links to therapists who are willing to treat people online, at least help do an assessment, give you someone to talk to, let off a bit of steam.
Yeah.
If all else fails, your family doctor or student health can send a prescription via email for a medication if they feel it's warranted.
Yeah.
I think the next question we already kind of answered, how to handle stress during pandemic time. Do you guys want to add anything to this?
I think we've touched on, I feel like I've touched on everything already related to that.
And Lynn?
No, I feel the same way,
Okay.
that we've covered a lot of things. And I mean, just try different things to see what helps you cope, because coping is individual. But just to reiterate some of the points Stephen and I have tried to make, which is accept your feelings, try to establish a routine, maintain social contacts and build new contacts, exercise, get physical movement, keep your living space clean, and use this as an opportunity to focus on some positive activity. Reading, maybe you've wanted to begin to learn a language or a new area. You can actually make use of this time.
Mhm.
Some students actually were asking, wouldn't it have been better if university canceled exams and canceled the semester, because students already have to worry about their own health, and they thought it would have been better if university just let them to live like that, just like to focus on their health and instead of worrying about exams too.
Um, I mean, I had mixed emotions about how the university handled this, but I think at the end of the day, how each faculty has handled this, which is basically giving the option to students of either completing the course, credit defail, or late withdrawal, I think satisfies as many possible needs of students, because there's students who need to graduate. There's students who are worried about, the grades that they spent all this time. Like I teach a 6-credit course, for example, that ran from September. For a student then to walk away from that course and not get credit for it would be potentially very expensive. Well, it is very expensive, and also a potentially larger loss of their time. So in consideration of all these factors, I think ultimately the university made the best decision they could possibly make at this, given all the complexities of the situation. I'm sure they've thought of they're already thinking of other ways of handling the fall, where we actually are able to plan potentially for courses being online in the fall. Hopefully it won't come to that, but I think once we reach the fall, and certainly we'll see this in the summer for summer courses, there'll be much more concrete ways of managing this, either through asynchronous delivery of courses in consideration of students who are managing and juggling a whole bunch of other things, maybe family members who are sick or whatnot. But yeah, I initially was a bit distraught by the decision by the university, but I think reflecting on it, I don't really think there was much more of a positive thing that they could have done at that time, given all the different needs of different students.
I agree. I think eventually they arrived at the best solution.
Yeah.
I guess what I found frustrating was the uncertainty. First, we were going to have exams, and we weren't. Then we were going to have online exams, and we weren't. And at each juncture, I was communicating with my students, and they'd say, okay, this is what we're going to do. And then it would change. And I felt really bad for them because it just added to their uncertainty.
Yeah.
Like, what is going to happen to me in this course?
Yeah.
So I'm glad the university has hit on something, and hopefully with foresight, it'll be better in the summer and fall.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Now, I didn't give a survey to, by any means study this, but just based on the thank you emails I got from students related to maintaining my lectures at a given time, at the same time that they were used to getting them, led me to believe that was valuable to them, that having that regularity was important to them. So, and even that synchronous contact, I think, is important for many students. I mean, it's the difference between wanting to choose a distance ed version of a course versus an in-person version of a course. I'm putting it in quotes now because the definition of in-person courses has changed. It'll probably be the difference will be between synchronous courses, where we're having a live lecture, versus asynchronous, where people have pre-recorded lectures for student convenience.
Yeah, no, and that's it was difficult because some students don't have good internet access. I had emails from a number of international students who've gone home, and they couldn't access things very easily. So as an instructor, you're trying to figure out what is fair to everybody as much as possible. You want to treat people alike, and it's just very hard to do under these circumstances. Yeah, I think regular courses, that are face-to-face in this way would be better if we can overcome
Technological hurdles, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Because I understand Zoom has the maximum number of people who can watch. Is that
Up
right?
to 500, yeah.
Oh, well, okay. So
Yeah.
we're
Yeah.
okay. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a bit difficult to manage. I've found though, when you have my class attendance one day a few weeks ago was about 100 students, and that's a bit difficult to manage on Zoom when you have people's questions and you're also monitoring the chat menu.
Yeah.
So I think as a teacher, we have to also learn how to adapt to that new modality, because you manage a classroom in a different way when you're in person, whereas now you have these hands up, like these virtual hands up, and
Yeah.
the chat menu where there's all these questions. It's great. I actually got more questions than I usually get in my in-person classes, because I think people felt a bit less nervous about putting up their hand, so to speak. So that was great. But from a management standpoint, I need practice doing it, to be honest.
There's someone saying here, like, they have already a routine for every day, but they find it so difficult to motivate themselves to be efficient during the lockdown. And they find it difficult even to get out of bed, even they have lectures, scheduled lectures every day.
Yeah.
But how can they deal with this?
Well, one thing I would want to know is, has their mood gone down? Are they feeling depressed? Is that why they aren't getting out of bed?
Yeah.
They're just talking about motivation, like how do I motivate myself to be efficient during lockdown? I find it super difficult to get out of bed and get my day going when I don't have anyone relying on me to show up in lecture,
Yeah.
for example.
When they can do lecture at their own time.
Even when there are lectures scheduled during the day,
Yeah.
because if they don't show up on Zoom, there's no like attendance or something for the lecture. So that's defined as difficult, even though with the scheduled regularly lectures.
Yeah.
I think, I'd express the same concern and question that Lynn had, which is that I have more questions for this person, I think,
Okay.
about what they're experiencing. Because, I'd want to know how long this is going on for and so forth, to give them some advice. It's all very well for me to say to this person, okay, well, you should set up a routine for yourself and something, but if you're not motivated and your motivation is really suffering to the point that you are having trouble getting out of bed, it's me giving that kind of advice could actually be not harmful but hurtful in a way, that they'll just feel less confident because they don't feel that motivated. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Lynn.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And I think hopefully that person will reach out and contact you, Stephen, because you'd want to find out, have you lost your sense of pleasure?
Yeah.
Is your mood kind of low? Are there other things going on where you can't decide what to do?
Yeah.
And I think it would be useful to talk through that with somebody to see what's driving the lack of motivation. It could be so many things. And I think Stephen's right. We don't want to give a facile response and make the person feel like they're failing.
Yeah.
Because it sounds like they already feel that way.
Yeah.
Okay. And one last question here. Someone is saying that the person feels they're sacrificing their mental health in order to get high grades during the current pandemic situation. And on the same note, how can I change my mindset about grades to be healthier? I don't want to sacrifice my mental health for my academic, results, like to get good results in grades. How can they balance both when they feel one is eating the other one?
Yeah. So I think, especially given what's going on this past term, I mean, I can't speak to future terms because courses will be operating differently and probably more in a more organized fashion. I mean, we won't be reacting to the current COVID crisis. We'll be dealing with the present COVID crisis. But in this present term that students are dealing with, I think personally, they should be taking their mental health as priority number one, and bearing in mind that their grade for this past term, provided they pass, is going to be looked upon by almost any admissions committee worldwide. It's not just Canada or Vancouver where we've been affected, with a big asterisk next to it. I can't guarantee that, but I have a strong suspicion that will be the case. And so worrying about grades for one's future, I mean, people worry about grades for their own self-motivation and so forth, but worrying about grades as to, will this now mean I won't get into med school? Will this now mean that I won't get into grad school? I think they should bear in mind the circumstances and how admissions committees will be looking upon those circumstances.
Absolutely.
I don't think getting a slightly worse grade or even a credit grade for this term is going to cause anyone to not give their application a second glance. Maybe I'm wrong on that point, but I'm pretty sure.
No, people will take it into consideration, and you can mention it in any applications that this was a term that was kind of lost due to COVID. Another thing I would look at is, you know, it's useful to focus on courses you're really interested in, that you yourself are interested in. And if you've got courses that are required that you aren't interested in, maybe they could be delayed.
Yeah.
And what you can do is focus on things that you lose yourself in.
Yeah.
Because I think if you're just working for grades, it does seem kind of soulless.
Yeah.
There's got to be more to it than that.
Yeah. Yeah, especially in this time, I agree completely. I mean, if you're trying to stay motivated, and it's hard enough to stay motivated as it is, I agree completely with Lynn that focusing on courses that drive you, that interest you, that you just love the readings, and give them sort of first rung, and let the other ones, if you're going to weigh your mental health against these other ones, weigh your mental health up here right now, especially right now, given the current circumstances.
Yeah, and don't be afraid to take a lighter load.
Yeah.
You know, if you feel like you're struggling and you can't do as well as you want, drop some courses. That's all right. There's research showing that it's actually healthier to know when to withdraw rather than keep plugging ahead.
Yeah.
That's true. I really agree with this, actually.
Yeah.
And realizing too that most undergraduate students don't complete in 4 years. So I know there's a lot of students who feel like they have to meet this deadline of 4 years.
Right.
And that might not be healthy for everyone. It might be manageable by some people, but not by others. And everyone has to sort of find their sweet spot in terms of balancing their mental health and mental wellness with these, university demands. And sometimes taking 4 courses a term is perfectly fine. I mean, you also have to balance that, of course, with any scholarships you might hold and any requirements, but there's no need to rush to that 4-year line mark. It sort of doesn't exist anymore. The average time it takes an undergraduate student to complete a degree at UBC now is somewhere between 5 and 6 years on average now. So no one's frowning upon you for taking an extra year to wrap up your degree, do extra volunteer hours in a lab, whatever you need to do in order to move on to the next stage of your life.
Absolutely. I really want to agree with that I think a lot of young people have this idea that life is this fixed set of stages and they have to do a certain amount every year. And that isn't true at all. You can take time off and enrich yourself, explore other options. You can come back. A lot of the most successful people are people who went off and did something else for a year or two, or even tried a different career before they came back. And so life isn't like a fixed series of steps that you have to do in a certain period of time. At any time, you can revise and go a different way.
Yeah.
Sure. Oh, great. So now we have arrived at the last part. If any of you guys would just like to give a little speech or something, or a bunch of advices to students.
So I just want I just want everyone to realize who's listening that there are supports out there for you. There's obviously great things like you've put together here today, but there's also other supports, and you should not feel afraid to reach out for support, either from your instructors if you are currently dealing with any issues in your current courses, or to other resources if you are concerned about your mental health and well-being. There's lots of resources, and there's especially a lot of resources right now because the government's well aware of the potential cost that social isolation might have on people's mental health and well-being. So they've put additional resources in place, and I think it's critical everyone sort of the best of times we should always be keeping an eye on our mental wellness, but here's a time now where we should be paying attention to those things even more given the current circumstances. So I just want to wish everyone the best of luck as we deal with the next few months, and that there is light at the end of the tunnel, and this isn't going to carry on forever.
Absolutely, I totally agree that this will pass.
Yeah.
Someone once said, at times like these, it's helpful to remember there have always been times like these.
Yeah.
And humanity survives, civilization goes on. Most people are very resilient and bounce back from this. So I don't know if it helps or not, but in the words of Winston Churchill, if you're going through hell, keep going and just keep persevering and follow your routines and reach out to people, and you will be fine.
Yeah. Yeah. And just double down on that social scheduling. I really like the idea of being able to schedule regular meeting times with friends and family, and they'll love it too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
If you suggest it. Yeah.
And don't forget grandma. So
yeah, and don't forget grandma.
Don't forget grandma.
Yeah.
Awesome. Anything else, guys, you would like to add?
No, that's it for me. Yeah.
No, best wishes. I hope a lot of people benefit.
Yes, me
I
too.
hope the same too. A lot of people actually watch that video to benefit from all the answers you guys provided to their questions and concerns. And I will keep running more webinars and asking people to provide more and more questions to know that they are not alone. We are all there to help them to provide answers to any questions and concerns they have. And this will be over soon. We will just go back to normal life soon.
Okay.
So yeah, there's like a light at the end of the tunnel, like what Stephen said. Yeah.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
And people should keep a journal. Your children and grandchildren will be very interested in what you went through. So.
Sure. Yes, that's true.
Yeah, absolutely true.
Perfect.
Okay.
With this, I'm going to end the meeting. Thank you so much, guys, for your time. Thank you so much for agreeing to meet with me and to do this for students. We really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Bye now.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.